Well, welcome. I am so happy to welcome Shira Raymond with us today. I have spoken to Shira before for the Trauma Recovery Summit, and we were just talking about how that conversation flowed so naturally. So it was a real wonderful thing when Shira said yes to another interview, something that we both feel is a very important topic. So today we are actually going to be talking about exploring the power of forgiveness. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our guest, Shira. She is a leader in the life transformation field for women, a best-selling author, and a speaker with her own TV show. She coaches women on mastering their mindsets and emotions to empower them to grow in ways they never thought possible. Her mission is to help people create the next chapter of their life on their terms. Her coaching empowers women to master their emotions, to change every aspect of their lives without regret. You can find more about Shira Raymond here at shiraraymond.com. Shira, welcome. It's so nice to see you again.
It is so wonderful to be here. Thank you.
So, forgiveness, this is a very interesting topic, isn't it? And one that I personally have batted around a few times in a process of healing. And I say batted around because as much as I want to embody that energy of forgiveness, there are times where it feels like certain things are unforgivable. And while as a teacher and somebody that really has taken on um, this practice of forgiveness for a lot of my life and know the benefits of it now, for those out there that are struggling with it and really just don't know how to make that happen, what would be one of the first things that you would say to somebody that just is really having a hard time holding forgiveness?
Um, that's a good question. What would be the most important thing? I think one of the things that most people don't realize with forgiveness, it's not about the other person because it's really about ourselves. And when we decide to heal and to let go and to forgive, whether it be ourselves for hanging on to that trauma or that event for so long, or whether it be to just simply understand that everything that happens is for our good, for our personal growth. And, I like to say that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. It's there for you to grow. And so when we forgive other people in our hearts, and I'm not even saying you have to go and necessarily express it to that person, because sometimes they're not deserving of it, but letting it go in our hearts, we free ourselves from those
Mm.
chains.
Yes, yes. Would you consider forgiveness an advanced practice of self-healing?
Yes and no. I think it's something that I think a lot of people it's much easier to play the blame game because that
Mm,
keeps us in victim mentality.
yes.
And if you really want to get out of victim mentality and start to live your life, then you have to start to embrace everything for the good.
There it
And even
is.
those traumatic events that happen to you, you don't have to understand why it happened. But if you understand that I'm supposed to grow from, there was like I'm religious. And
Mm.
so our perspective in Judaism is that um, when things happen, it's a process of growth. And I can give you a great story.
Please
Um,
do.
I, I met this gentleman when I first came to Israel in 1995. And I had got set up to go to his family's house for a Friday night dinner. And when I came, that was when Rabin was shot, and there was a lot of bus
Mm.
bombings and stuff going on here in Jerusalem. It was kind of scary. One day I was taking the bus and I heard this big boom, and apparently the bus behind me had a suicide bomber on it. So it was like really close to home. And this gentleman told me this incredible story that every day he would take the bus to work with a colleague, and they would meet at the bus stop and take the bus together. And this one particular day, they got on the bus, and the bus was full. And the only place where the two of them could sit together was in the very back row of the bus. And this man refused to sit back there. And so he found a single seat further up in the bus, and his colleague took one in the back seat. Well, unfortunately, there was a suicide bomber on that bus, and his friend perished in the bus bombing. But what he said was, why was it that I didn't sit in the back seat with my friend? He said, when I was 13 years old and living in New York, and I was taking the bus everywhere I needed to go, one day I was sitting in the back seat of the bus, and somebody mugged me. And
Ah.
from that time on, I was so afraid to sit in the back of the bus that I never did again. And so in Judaism, when we understand this, it's like, okay, God sees the big picture of everything.
Mm.
So he knew that 30 years down the road, he was going to have to save this man's life and keep him out of the back seat of the bus. And the only way to do that is to get him mugged when he's 13 years old when he's in New York.
Hmm. I
So
see.
we don't always see the connection of why things happen to us. But if we can start to change our perspective and understand that everything that happens is for our growth,
Right.
eh,
Right.
then it's all for the good.
Yes. Yes. The reason I asked that about an advanced practice, I'm just thinking about those in our audience that are dealing with extraordinary circumstances, and that at a physical and emotional level, there could be exhaustion or just complete overwhelm and an inability to grasp this concept of forgiveness. And and I understand that because I have been in that same place. So when I ask that question about advanced practice, I'm thinking, what steps do we need? Let's say I am that person that's just completely overwhelmed, weak in a very weakened state. What would I do if I couldn't yet grasp that concept? That makes
Yes,
so much sense, to me, of course, and you, but maybe not
right,
to them in that kind of weakened state.
right. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for clarifying because this is really important. And I think one of the baby steps that we can do, which was so transformational in my life, and I just kind of stumbled upon this, is when we start to step into gratitude. Um, and again, that can be really, really hard for people also when they're going through trauma, like, oh, but this keeps happening to me and this keeps happening to me. And you have to understand is, I guess the audience needs to understand is what you focus on grows. And so if you continue to think in that negative headspace and, oh, life is horrible, nothing good happens to me, well, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I always recommend to my clients is to make a list of 50 things you're grateful for. And they think I'm absolutely crazy. What? 50? How am I going to come up with that? And I say, you know what? I'll give you 10 to 15 right now. Are you happy you have eyes to see, that you have a nose you can smell the beautiful scents around you? You have teeth you can chew, a mouth you can taste, ears you can hear, arms you can hug people. Like, we forget that there's so many things that we should be grateful for just on our physical body. You don't have to think about taking a breath or your heart beating.
Mm.
It doesn't automatically, right? And so once we start to be aware of things that we really are grateful in our life, then we can slowly begin to add on that and to start to notice those good things. But if we
Mhm.
don't make a list, we don't have anything to focus on.
That's right. That's right. What are some of the initial benefits that someone can expect to experience at a physical and, let's say, emotional level?
Well, when I think first off, this is all part of an emotional intelligence. It's part of growing. And we have to understand that our emotions affect us on a physical level as well. So when we're hanging on to the emotional trauma, right? We know that if you break down the word disease, it means dis-ease, right? It has to come out some way. So oftentimes people are making themselves sick because they're not dealing with their emotions properly. And so when we start to focus on the positive things in our life and really start to, you know, fake it till you make it if you have to, that's okay also in this process. It's just really shifting your awareness. But I know for me, as I went through this process myself, I felt, they talk about in emotional intelligence that, everything in the world is made up of energy and vibration. And so are our emotions. And so when we're in shame and guilt and fear, it's very low on the chart of emotional intelligence. And it's really an ego state because
Mm.
you can only think about yourself. And according to Dr. David Hopkins, there's 9 negative emotions before you even get to courage, which is the breaking point into the higher emotions. And
Mm.
then you start to move out of ego. And when you start to move out of ego, right, then you can make this shift and you see the world in a different eye. Maybe it's from a God perspective or with more awe, but you feel yourself, your emotions, everything is elevating vibrationally. I mean, I go through the day and I feel like I'm reverberating a lot of times, you know, and heartmath.org, they're an organization that can check the vibrations of people in rooms or even like in the world. And they said that our emotions come out 8 meters from us.
Mm.
And that's why when you get into a room with somebody who's really negative, you sense it.
Yeah.
And you don't want, when you start to move into these higher emotions, you want to stay away from those people. And
Yes.
just the opposite is true when there's somebody who's in a high vibrational state, you're attracted to that person. Whether you go to them or not is a different story because it may be out of fear that you don't feel worthy of being close to a person like that. But that's a whole nother story. But you can feel that energetic vibration coming off of you and within you. It's amazing.
How does forgiving someone positively impact your life?
So when we forgive people, the positive aspect of it is, first off, we're not hanging on to those negative emotions anymore. So it cannot have a physical impact on us anymore. We don't have the stress of those events anymore. I read an article and I love quoting this woman, Ava Kor. Have you heard of her?
I
She
haven't,
was a
no.
Holocaust survivor. She was one of Mengele's twins. So you can imagine the horrific things that happened to her in her young life, her and her sister. And she was very embittered after the war, obviously at Mengele, the Nazis. This is kind of apropos. I think today's Holocaust Day, Remembrance Day here.
Mm.
Um, and anyway, so she carried all of this bitterness with her. So it affected every relationship that she had, whether it was with her husband, her kids, her community. And she said her life did not begin until she was 80 years old when she decided to forgive Mengele and the Nazis for what they did.
Wow.
Obviously, she can't go searching them out and say, I forgive you, but it was in her heart.
Yes. Yes. You said earlier about forgiving yourself too, and one of the things that has really come through for me in a process of forgiveness is, this whole opportunity to take my piece of responsibility. And so in my case, it was, that my mom left my family when I was 13 and my dad died when I was 16.
Oh
it's
gosh.
it's very interesting because you wouldn't think I would be mad at or hurt by my father. He died, right? But this is really dropping into sort of that emotional intelligence you spoke about earlier, right? That we
Absolutely. Well,
reference these
abandonment,
and
for
and,
sure.
and so a key part of my process in probably the biggest forgiveness opportunity I've had in my life was this reconciling my own piece of what that meant. And you just spoke about this so beautifully, as far as her forgiveness at 80. And, mine was really based around what was my, what was my, I want to say piece of the pie, but what was my action? Because what I realized was my action towards my mother, my bitterness, my anger, was a bigger part of the forgiveness process than even forgiving her.
Right.
And that for me seemed like an incredible thing. In fact, I'm still working with that. So I love that you brought up earlier that, of course there is this forgiveness of another, but that some of the biggest work we do is forgiving ourselves in whatever um, that might mean.
Absolutely. I think
And
too many times when things happen to us and we start to heal and we start to go through this growth process, um, and we're starting to take responsibility and stop blaming other people, right? Then
right,
it's natural for us to feel like then upset with ourselves, like, oh my gosh, why did I allow myself to hang on to this for so long? And that's why the forgiving of ourselves is so important because we need to be able to say, you know what? This was like so much bigger than what we could have dealt with then. And I didn't know about this growth process of what I could do to get out of this or um, different aspects that I could do, or I didn't feel I had the emotional or physical strength to even deal with it then. But you know what? I have to love myself also. And
yes,
so that forgiveness allows you also to have that self love and really that self care,
yes,
is being able to nurture yourself and say, you know what? I was hurt. And it's okay for me to forgive myself in that process.
yes, yes. Can we talk a little bit about what it's like to hold on to anger and bitterness? I mean, we're talking about this process of healing through this. But for me, there really was, a tipping point where this victimization, this blame, this awareness that I was actually bringing in this energy to my life,
Yes,
different people, different situations, but common denominator was me,
right,
and
right,
that really there was just this point where it was like, I, I this will take me down. This energy will take me down at a physical level, an emotional level, or physical level if I don't reconcile what's going on. So can we talk a
right.
little, can you speak to that, what it's like to hold on to this and not let it go?
Well, I think that's a great question because I know in, my younger years before I had gotten married, like, through the whole dating process, right? I found when I think back about it now, it's like I dated these guys that weren't good for me. And now I see that like it kind of followed a pattern. And I realized that it followed a pattern because I didn't feel worthy of anything better than that. So we end up holding ourselves back from the true joy that we really want in our life because we're too afraid to look at um, what it is, where the patterns are. Because if we're honest with ourselves and we look back over our lives, we can see like, man, if I keep having these dysfunctional relationships, maybe there's a problem here. And the problem's me because I'm the common denominator, just like you said, Sarah, on this whole process. And so what is it that I need to do and to heal and to grow so I can change the trajectory of my life in the future, that it doesn't keep following the past.
Yes, there it is. There it is. Because, I sometimes feel like, these terms that we use, or, forgiveness or gratitude, or, that these conceptually are things that people have no relationship to, right? And so how do we get closer to having that relationship? And in my head, in my experience, it was really just understanding that life couldn't happen like this anymore, as you just mentioned, as I just mentioned, that there was something that had to happen. And my prayer is that it doesn't have to be that hard for those of you out there listening to this, but that it is important to check in with how we feel in our body, in our emotions, in our experience in life, and say, is it enough? Is it sustainable? Is this
Right.
the way you want it to be for the rest of your life? Um,
Exactly. And look at the patterns. I mean, if
Look at
you're
the
if you're
patterns.
seeing aspects of your life that aren't working for you in certain relationships that you think could improve, whether it be, with your kids, with your spouse, whether or your friendships.
It's it's very confusing at times, isn't it, when people are on different pages than we are, and when our expectations are different. I understand, and I think that's another part of just like integrating this forgiveness into your life, isn't it? So
Yes.
that's my question to you is like, how would you suggest that like maybe it's not this monumental traumatic event that has gone on, excuse me, but more like what you've just discussed. How will people really integrate? How could people really integrate forgiveness into a situation like you just spoke of?
Well, I mean, I think as we work and we grow on ourselves, which to me, that's what our mission here is on life, in this world, in this lifetime, is to keep growing. Like, you cannot be settled and happy with where you are because there's always someplace better you can go. And when you start to look at life that way, it shifts your perspective on everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I'm really learning is when because I'm working with a healer, and I was talking about this whole situation with her, and this woman is she does, I don't know what she does, because she'll tell you things about yourself while she's working hands on you, so I don't even know how to describe what she does. But she said to me that my job right now in this lifetime is that I have to learn to have compassion and mercy on other people.
Mhm.
And I think when that's a really important thing for everybody to learn to have as well. This woman said, my healer said this to me, like, no, your job here is to learn how to be compassionate, mercy. You're not to get rid of this person as a friend. Now, I know that I can set boundaries and I don't have to, come all chummy chummy with her, um, just out of self protection, because I don't know how, if she's volatile or not. But I just have to have compassion and love for her, that she has the forethought to like grow from this experience and say, wow, what is it that I can start to do to empower myself more
Mm.
that I can have better relationships with myself, my kids, and also my friends.
Yeah. I love the words compassion and mercy. They feel like the big sisters to forgiveness to
Yes.
me. Um, I also just want to bring light to what you said about boundaries, that, this isn't about not being in touch with your emotions. This isn't like blanket forgiveness. This is, really about integrating this whole concept, this whole experience, and really letting it, as I would imagine, as I do, sort of tune you in at a different level. Would that be accurate, Shira?
Yeah,
Yeah.
look, I think the biggest problem is, especially in our, I'm going to assume, that we're in a similar generation.
Yeah,
And
we
back
are.
then, we didn't talk about emotions,
No.
right? Like, it was never brought up in my household. How are you feeling today? Like, okay, they may have said, how you feeling okay, but they didn't really want to know the answer, and they didn't really want to dive deep into
That's
what
right.
that meant
Yeah.
because they didn't know what that was and how to deal with it either. And I think this is one of the greatest gifts that God's given us right now, is that really the opportunity to heal and grow. Like, there's so many modalities and there's so many people out there who can guide us and show us ways that we can heal, that it doesn't even have to be painful.
Yeah.
I mean, I know for me, look, I just recently walked away from a marriage of 25 years, and it was peaceful. I mean, I grew and I was like working on my emotional intelligence. I'm raising my vibration, feeling really good. And I'm like, I'm so excited. Do you want to hear about this? Moving into gratitude. And my ex-husband was like, you know what? No, I don't want to hear about it. And it's like, oh crap. Like, okay, I knew for me at that point, like if I stayed here, like, what are my choices? I have no place to grow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I knew for me, like at that point, I was the butterfly coming out of the cocoon.
Mm.
And I
Yes.
had to spread my wings and no regrets.
Yes. Yes. What would you send this lovely audience off with today? What message is it that you would like to conclude with?
Just start to view life, that everything that happens is an opportunity for growth, and make your gratitude list so that way you can catch yourself, the ants, the automatic negative thoughts. When you're having those thought processes, pull out your list and start to read it. And you'll be able to start shifting your perspective right away from the negative headspace into more positive. And maybe at the beginning you do that one time a week, but then it's going to start to come a few times a week, and then every day, once a day. And slowly you're going to grow, and it'll be life altering.
Thank you so much, Shira. I appreciate your being here. Shira has a wealth of experience in the life transformational field, and her coaching and Women's Empowerment International are her platforms for helping people heal emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally. This interview has been an inspiring reminder that anything is possible if we dare to make the choice to heal and grow. Again, you can find Shira at Shira, Shira, Raymond, RAYMOND.com. Thank you again, Shira. We appreciate your being here so very much.